I just want to say thank you to Fitzroy Library as well for having us. Auntie Donna was mentioned. The first place that we ever did rehearsals was downstairs in the meeting rooms here, screaming as loud as possible for $15 for 3 hours. So, and that was 12, 13 years ago. It's a wonderful institution. I'm so happy to be back here. I want to talk about the day that I met Helen. I got to read, like many football fans, over the off-season, I got very sad that I was not able to watch footy every day. It's such a big part of my life. It's my break from what I do for a living. And I was desperate for any football content I could have. I went to High Point and went into the AFL store and just looked around for a bit and tried to spark up a conversation with the 18-year-old working there about footy. I was desperate. They didn't like football. I was desperate. But then a friend of mine, Sam, who I work with, said, "Are you aware of The Season?" And I said, "What's that?" He said, "One of Australia's greatest writers has written a book about football." And I went, "Well, I've got to read that." So over the summer, I read The Season and fell in love with Helen and everything that she's done. I went through all of her books, different to The Season, a lot of them, and went back. But I also came out of it thinking I would love to be able to chat to Helen. I went, "How can I find this person?" And I went on a journey to find your contact details. And I did, and I got them. And you generously wrote back and came in. And one day at our studio, we had a lovely long chat. We had a yarn about the footy. It was wonderful to talk to you. And then I said, "Do you want to lift home?" And you said, "Yeah." And then we drove back to your house and we had great, do you remember this? We chatted about, we instinctively both know which way north is at any point.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
Do you know where north is right now?
Yes, that away.
Yes, yeah. Correct. Yeah. And it was just lovely to meet. And then I got the most wonderful email saying, "Helen would like you to co-host a chat at Fitzroy." And I was blown away and I said, I'll move heaven and earth to do that. And then before we came on, she said, "You've got to keep your red beanie on." So it's keeping a line of always doing what you say. But so lovely and honoured to have you. Can we give it up for Helen Garner before we start?
Thanks, Broden.
So I want to start with, we're talking about The Season predominantly. Why did you write this book? How's that?
That's an existential question. Well, I was bored and I thought, oh, maybe I'm finished as a writer. I don't know what I'm going to do next. And I felt sort of old and crabby and not knowing what to do with myself. And I used to drive my grandson to training and just drop him off and then drive home. And one evening I drove him to training in pre-season, and because I'd never heard of pre-season, I didn't even know. I'm going to throw around a few terms. And but I looked at him and I thought, he's huge. How did he get so big? And I didn't notice. I mean, no, he was in the car next to me instead of in the back seat. You know, this hulking great creature. And I suddenly thought, oh, maybe there's something here for me to think about, or maybe it'd just be fun and to hang around him as a footballer. And I mean, he'd been playing footy since the under-8s, and I'd never been in the slightest bit interested. But so I said to him, "How would you feel if I came to your training?" And he goes, "What? Why?" And I said, "Well, you know, I'm bored and I've got nothing to write about, and maybe there's a story there that I could tell." And he said, "Oh, you better ask the coach." So it turns out, he said, "We've got a new coach." Turned out that it was his new coach. His name was Archie, and he was only about 4 years older than the guys in the team. And I thought, well, I'll have a coffee with Archie, and because I'd known him since he was like that big, because our families know each other. And so we went and had a coffee, and I said, how would it be if I came to training? And he said, "Oh, yeah, it'd be great." I said, "Well, should I speak to the club?" He said, "No, don't say anything to them. They'll just try to get control of it." And I said, "Oh, well, do you think I should speak to the boys?" And he said, "Helen, they're 15. They're boys. they won't hear a thing you say, and when you leave, they won't even remember you were there. So I thought, and as a journalist, I thought, yippee, that's. I thought that's the perfect situation. They couldn't give a shit whether I was there or not, and so I started to go, and I thought, well, I didn't want to do interviews or research or anything like that. I thought I just want to hang around and watch what happens. So that's what I did, and after the first night of training that I watched, I'm driving home with my grandson. His name's Ambrose, and I go. I said, "Well, did you notice that I was there? Was it? Did it bother you that I was there? Because I was standing way back, practically behind a tree." And he said, "No." He said, "No. I was. I was aware of you all the time." And I said, "Oh, damn! I was hoping that wouldn't happen." He said, "No, it was cool because I just made me want to do cool things, so I'd be in the book."
Did you make a point to mention his cool things? Because he comes across as a good footy player in the book, Amby.
Yeah, well, yes, I had no idea whether he was a good player or not. I mean, he might have been a complete dud for all I knew. But I sort of, it was really interesting to watch a whole season and to see how he grew and changed as a player. And the other blokes in the team as well, who I didn't know, because it's not that they weren't friends of his. It was just a footy team and he was in it. But and the other thing about this is that not once during the season did a single one of those boys give me eye contact, or greet me, or sort of seem to notice that I was there. And at first I thought, oh, this is really great, I'm completely free. And then after a while I started to feel a bit sort of hurt. So can't they see how faithful I am?
Yeah.
And they couldn't give a damn, but all they wanted to do was get the ball and kick it.
Yeah. And when they used to ride their bike up, and was one boy in particular?
That's one of the things. I learnt. Look, I come from a family that's almost entirely girls, and my whole adult life has been just sort of lived through the lens of feminism. So I know a lot about girls and women, and I know lots of blokes, but I've been sort of fighting them for a lot of my life. But as I've got older, I feel more comradely with men, and I feel friendly towards them and enjoy their company, and don't feel I have to take stands on everything all the time. Now, how did I get onto that? Oh, yeah. So I noticed I noticed a lot of things about boys that I'd never been conscious of before. Like, for example, they all had, I'm talking about teenage boys, tunnel vision. And I noticed this particularly, I'd be standing around before, as they were all arriving for training, and a kid would ride up on his bike, step off the bike and just throw it to one side like that and just keep walking straight ahead, and they'd sort of rip off their bag and just chuck it away like that. They're looking straight ahead the whole time. Where's the ball? And I could see that was very enlightening to me, because I put this in the book too. I've noticed that when things get lost, blokes aren't very good at finding it. And I'm talking about just things around the house. There was one of the mums at the team told me that her in their place the TV remote got lost. They couldn't find it anywhere, and her husband searched the house high and low, and he was shouting in rage and frustration, and he said, "Whoever finds the remote gets $100. And one of the girls in the family just walked into the room and she goes, "Oh, there it is." And it was just sitting there, and he'd been tearing out his hair. But the thing about tunnel vision is, what I learned from watching the training was I saw how the coach was trying to teach them to break out of that. And when they're training, he was always shouting to them, look wide. And so they could see not just whether they're going to kick a goal, but what everyone else on the team is doing and what that means for them. I loved all that part of it, just watching a team be formed.
Yeah. Do you feel like sport in growing up and being a teenager important part of growing up and becoming an adult and taking into life. I work with people who didn't grow up in team sports, and I feel like I learnt a lot through team sports. But watching that from afar, do you feel like that you took anything from that?
Well, see, I was always hopeless at sport, and when I was a girl, I didn't like it because, I mean, look, all I wanted to do was just lie on my bed and read a book, and this meant that I was kind of not very popular,
Sure.
and also I've never understood teams, and I've kind of in a way kind of despised them and thought that they had, you know, those people that I now see are terrible crashing balls who disapprove of footy, and think that it's moronic. And, you know, old men who don't like footy who say, oh, I don't know why they don't get 18 balls and give one to each of them, and then they wouldn't have to fight for them. And I just think, what is the matter with you, pal?
It might go that way. We might change. We're changing rules all the time. We might bring in 18 balls eventually.
Oh, that's taking it too far.
Well, you talk. I love the book partly because it's about footy, but also for me, it felt like I was hearing about family from a perspective that I'd not experienced yet, and particularly being a grandmother or being a grandparent, and I felt quite connected to both my nanas reading your book and the relationships I had with them. Not to say that we're a nana-grandson dynamic at all, but that's the perspective I had from it. Do you like being a grandparent?
Oh, yeah. It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah?
Yeah, fair income. Actually, I can't see any of you hardly tonight because of the lights, but I do notice that when I do public things for this book, lots and lots of nanas are there. and I look at them and I think, gee, they look really sort of happy and slightly tearful, which is how I felt a lot of the time throughout the season. I was just, yeah, well, I don't want to go off on that tangent.
You talk about, there's a great line that I'm going to have a crack at, which is, I want to know him before he becomes a man and before I die, which feels like the core of it.
Yeah, that's the sort of nub of it, really.
And are you glad that you spent that time with Ambi? Did you learn heaps? And
yeah. I learned heaps. Well, see, we've always got on well because I've always lived next door to my grandchildren ever since they were born, so I've had a lot to do with them all their lives. And yeah, it's really, I did feel I forged a sort of a bond with him through this, but the thing about being a grandparent is that you go through, I've found that you tend to go through a phase of great intimacy with each of your grandchildren one at a time. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't last at that degree of intensity right through their childhood. But I know with the other the two older ones, I was very, very close with them when they were a certain age, and then they got bigger and they didn't need my company and so much.
Yeah.
But so Ambi was the last one, and I thought, well, there's not going to be any more, so this is my chance to get in there and see and get to know him properly.
Yeah. Does he get recognised now? And when he goes around, do people think of him from the book, or?
Well, I don't know. There's no there's no picture of him, like he's not on the cover or anything. And I thought, I actually was a bit worried about it. I said, well, how do you feel about this? You know, I said, look, I've finished the book. Here's the first draft of the book. Could you read it and tell me what you think? And if there's anything in there about you that you don't want me to say, I'll take it out or I'll rewrite that. Mm. So I go out to work, and when I come home at the end of the day, he's sitting out on the back porch and sort of sitting there with his, you know, like this, looking out into the backyard, and I thought, oh my God, he's hated it. And I came up behind him, and he turned around with this enormous smile on his face and said, thanks, Hal, for writing that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he loved it, yeah. So I thought he might be embarrassed because in a sense he gets more airtime than other guys in the story, or because there's this intimacy between us. And a lot of this stuff about football comes out in conversations between me and Ambi, because I didn't know any of the finer points of the game.
Yeah.
You know, I'd have to ask him, well, what's tagging? And can you please tell me the rules of tackling? And so we'd have these conversations in the car driving home from training, and then I'd go and write down what he'd said, and that made me look like an expert. Not.
My memory from the book that sticks out the most is when he comes home, stroppy, and he's like, women, girls, I can't... What's he say?
Oh, he says, girls are the bane of my existence.
Yeah. So he got a draft of it. That's good then. I'm glad he...
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't have dreamt of not showing it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about footy. Do you love footy?
Yes, I adore it. And I can pinpoint the moments when I really started to sort of get hooked on it. Can I tell them?
Please.
Well, the first one, I guess, was in the year 2000. I'd been living in Sydney. I'd married. It was my third marriage. It's just broken up, and so I was all kind of sorry for myself and came home with my tail between my legs. And I was living in this little rented house over in Ascot Vale. And one night, I should say that my family are just kind of total bulldog fanatics. So I could see that if I was going to spend a lot of time with them as they had their children, I better get real about footy. And so I was watching on TV one night and I saw a documentary called The Year of the Dogs, which I'm sure some people are familiar with. But it was a documentary about the time when Australian rules was kind of being... a lot of teams were being amalgamated and new ones formed, and the game was kind of becoming a national game. And I looked at this. It was an astonishing documentary, actually. There were these scenes that it stuck in my mind, and they'd be the end of a game, and the players would come off the team filthy and sweating and having been thrashed again, and they were being harangued by this ferocious coach, and he was telling them how fucking hopeless they were, and it was really heartbreaking. And meanwhile, they're running this little theme through the documentary of these two old women, or an old grandmother and her middle-aged daughter, who were rusted on fans, and they showed them going. They used to go to training, and they'd sit, even if it was raining, they'd sit all alone in there. With their little umbrellas up and their dripping rain and their beanies and their scarves. And I thought, God, this is kind of nuts. I don't get it. But then there was an interview with the captain of the team at the time, who was Chris Grant. And the interviewer said to him, how come you haven't joined one of these flashy new teams that shine in the dark? And he said, well, I'll tell you why. He said, I was thinking, whether I should move to whatever team it was that wanted him. But he said, I got a letter from a little boy, and it was in printing, and it said, Dear Chris Grant, please don't leave. I haven't got much money. This is all I can spare. And onto the letter he'd sticky taped a 50-cent piece. And so Chris Grant says, so I couldn't leave, could I? And I thought, what a fabulous bloke. I mean, is this the spirit of footy? And so I just rushed straight to the computer and joined the club. And I've never regretted it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a good chance it was a 50-year-old just writing the card, I reckon. But
when I told that story, I was just talking to a crowd with Bob Murphy. Bob Murphy? I did a gig with Bob Murphy.
That's good.
Anyway, I told that story and he laughed and said, I was that little boy.
Yeah. That makes sense. You were talking before about reading books growing up. Is there something about the community of football that you think draws you to it, as opposed to being someone who works in solitude a fair bit?
Yeah, well, I see. I don't actually go to the footy because I can't see. I'm old and I'm too small and I just can't get the game. But, I mean, it's hard enough watching it when it's your grandson who's getting the shit kicked out of him in front of your eyes.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But no, I just kind of... I have all these rather lofty ideas about football, and I think that I used to be, when I was sort of, as it were, training myself to be a fan, and I used to see players, their behaviour on the field sometimes reminded me of ancient Greek sculptures that I'd seen.
Yeah.
I mean, just postures that the players would fall into spontaneously, especially at moments of defeat. You know, they would, or they'd sort of go down on the ground in these almost like, I don't quite know how to describe the postures, but they were sort of noble, and they came from, you know, Homer and ancient things. And I was terribly moved by that. And I used to think, I mean, another thing that I loved is when you see, I've got this photo on my phone. I have got a lot of trouble from my family for having football photos on my phone, but I'll tell one story about this. One time, one of my other grandsons was in a local footy team, and I took a photo, and in the team there was this small boy. He was very, very small, and he was absolutely guts personified. I used to love watching him. Anyway, I saw them coming off the field, and so the little one's walking in the middle and a normal-sized kid on either side of him. And they were just filthy and sweaty and all kind of, you know, bruised up and everything. And I took a photo and I had it on my phone as a screensaver, or whatever it's called. Anyway, one of my grandchildren picked up my phone and said, "Helen, why have you got a photo of Tommy on your phone? It's disturbing." That was the word they used. And my whole family ganged up on me. They said, "You can't have a photo of these kids on your phone." I go, "What? Why not?" And
was it your wallpaper, or was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's okay. I mean,
well, I was proud of it. I said, "Look, I admire him. I think he's a fantastic, gutsy little player. Why can't I have a photo?" And they were going, "Oh, Helen, how would you like it if a perfect stranger had a photo of you on their phone?" And I said, "I wouldn't give a shit. What are you talking about?"
What's your wallpaper at the moment?
Actually, it's a photo of one of my grandsons.
Oh, lovely.
Wearing a cowboy hat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was he at a rodeo or something? Or?
I don't think so. I think he was just in the kitchen.
Wonderful. I admire the setup that you have, where you have this big, beautiful backyard with your daughter's family and all of it. Is that going good? Is that a nice setup at the moment?
Oh yeah, we just took the house next door to my daughter and her husband's place came on the market in about the year 2001.
Yep.
And they said, "Oh, why don't you just buy this house and come and live next door?" And we took the fence down, and so we've got a big backyard. No, it's really good.
Hell yeah.
But I was going to talk more about the nobility of football.
No, I tangented, yes, please. I'd love to know more.
No, it's about the photo. Some people, you know, there are Bulldog fanatics here that will remember there's once when Josh Bruce, his knee has just given way again after he'd had a replacement, and the team's just been thrashed, and they're coming off the field, and there's this photo, it was in the paper, of Bont with his arm around Josh Bruce to help him off the field, and their faces, I mean, they're so exhausted, and Josh Bruce is so in pain and he's in distress, and his captain is he had his arm around him, and Bont had his cheek against Josh Bruce's shoulder in this, and they're these enormous hands, they're great huge hands that were, and it was the most magnificent photo. And I thought, I looked at that and I thought, that's out of Homer or Virgil. You know, I'm in a reading group and we read all that kind of literature that we're too lazy to read on our own, and we only read it in a reading group. So just lines about what men have to deal with in battle, and it sort of amazed me to see themes that are shared by footy, by great games of sport which involves violence basically.
Yeah. I got asked recently what I love about football, and I found it almost impossible to answer for me because it's so core to family and life, and it's a way that I'm sitting here talking to you, and it's a pathway to having bigger conversations.
Yeah.
Do you feel that in society, particularly in Melbourne?
Oh, I do. I remember when I came back from Sydney, I was on a train one evening going out, and it was a footy night, which I at that point didn't know, and I could see all these families streaming across that bridge at Spencer Street, and each family had its own footy, and they were like bouncing it as they walked, and they looked so happy. And everybody was excited and pleased, and there were men and there were women and there were children. It wasn't like a brawling, horrible crowd that was going to bash each other up later. But I thought, gee, this is marvellous. It's so social and sociable. And I found that too, getting close to the team, that the grown-ups, when I told people would say, oh, what are you working on? I'd say, oh, I'm writing a book about kids football, and they go, oh, wait till you meet the parents. And I thought, oh really, it's going to be like that? But the parents of the kids in Ambi's team, I just loved them. They were so this is another thing, because I would go because training covers the time of the evening when all the other kids are home and the mums are looking after them and maybe getting the tea ready, and the bigger boys are down at Holland Park kicking their footy. And so occasionally there would be fathers who, often I was the only person at training, and the coach knew who I was, but and he would say hello, but the boys just completely ignored me. But their fathers would turn up, just to be 2 or 3 dads, and we'd kind of sidle up to each other and go, which one's yours? And then we'd praise each other's offspring.
Yeah, that was the ritual. That was the ritual, wasn't it? Is you'd both say something nice about the other kid.
And I was really struck by how the sort of loyalty there is, and it's a kind of suburban feeling. It's I felt that it was a great privilege, really, to I couldn't say I was going to say I didn't attach myself to the team, but once I was the oranges lady.
How'd you go?
I was really good at it.
Did you go in quarters or eighths or?
I had to think a lot about that when I was cutting them up.
Yeah.
How are they supposed to be?
I would think that the size of the mouth is important. You don't want too big.
They all had big mouths, so mouthy kids.
Or maybe a quarter then, yeah.
Quarters, yeah, okay. Anyway, it seemed to work. But the amazing thing was to actually go among them when they're on the field, and they're all pumped up, and they seem to like double in size after they've played a quarter. And I'd sort of walk out there nervously holding out my... So a friend of mine said it was like at Bullen's Lion Safari. But and I think, how did they get so big? They were just big, towering. But when I saw them in the street, they didn't seem all that huge. But some force is in them and is being manifested by them in the game.
Yeah. The book is also that season or two where a boy grows into being a man. Did you learn anything writing this about that you didn't know already, or was that something that was that core to what you were trying to write about? Oh,
you mean about boys turning into men?
Yeah.
Well, it is. It does seem to me a much greater or more. What am I trying to say? The transformation of it seems to arrive suddenly. I mean, I remember one morning I had to go and wake Ambi up to get up for school, and I sort of walked into his bedroom. I knocked on the door, of course, and then lying on his bed, it was summertime, was this man. And I thought, who the hell is that? And then I looked and it was Ambi, and he'd sort of like turned into a man overnight. He was lying there. We just had his little cotton pyjamas on. He was sort of lying there with his arms under his head like this, and he looked up at me with this roguish expression on his face. I thought, wait a minute, this is my boy that I used to carry. It was a wonderful experience, the whole thing.
That's great. let's talk to you talked about Bont briefly. You love Bont, and that
I worship Bont.
You worship Bont. Marcus Bontempelli is potentially the greatest Western Bulldog player, Footscray Bulldog player ever to play, I would say, in my opinion. Yeah, there you go. That's the heckles we want. And you said you never wanted to meet him, or you would like, I would prefer not to meet.
Well, I mean, look, no, I don't know if people want to meet their idol, because, I mean, there's certain writers that I just worship also, and I just don't want to meet them.
Yeah.
Because I've already met them in their work, and everything that's beautiful and superb about their work is, I mean, that's the best of a person, is what they make. And then you meet them and they're sort of whingy or boring or just stupid. Yeah.
My ears are burning, actually, yeah.
No, what happened was...
Yeah, you're lovely, Helen, I must say.
Oh, shut up. No, what happened was, I'll tell you how I met Bont.
Yes.
Well, I did a little favour for the team. That's another story. Anyway, the people I was with said, "Oh, do you want to come over and watch training? They're at training this afternoon." I go, "Yeah, I'd love to." So we go over to the Whitten Oval, and there I see, all these gods running around on the team and on the field, and I just was loving watching them close up in real life because I've only ever seen them on TV.
How was that? How was it to see them in person?
Oh, well, I couldn't believe it. There's Libba. Oh my God, he's a real person. It's sort of like they're not two-dimensional. Anyway, so I'm standing there admiring them and adoring them. And the guy from the publicity, well, whoever he was, says to me, oh, there's Bont. He says, come on, I'll introduce you. And I go, no, he doesn't want to meet me. That's what I kept saying. I didn't say I don't want to meet him. I said, he doesn't want to meet me because I'm just some sort of worm crawling past. And the guy says to me, oh, don't be stupid. Come on, we'll introduce you. So then suddenly there was this person 20 feet tall, and I came up to about his nipple or something, and then he introduced me, and I really sort of said something really dumb because he was wearing a kind of headband, and I just I said, oh, hello. I said, your hair. And in a way like I was his nana. He said, oh, yeah. He said, I'm going to get it cut before the season starts. And so I just felt such an idiot. And they took a photo. Oh, God, I look so awful. I've got this hat. I mean, I'm just like this, and I've got this hat pulled right down, and I'm going... It's the worst photo that anyone ever took of me.
You're not going to it's not on your wallpaper?
Absolutely not. But I also the same day met Cody Waitman.
Oh, yeah, classic.
Another icon in my book.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, of course, wearing nothing but shorts and just ran out of the gym.
Topless.
And I was introduced to him, and he goes, oh, you're the one that wrote that book. He said, I haven't read it. My parents have read it and my nana's read it, and she is stoked.
How's that?
Yeah, that's right.
That's great. That's what
he also told me that he'd just been found to have 2 kneecaps on one leg. Yeah, that's what's wrong with him.
Cody Waitman has 2 kneecaps on one knee.
Well, I mean, he's got one leg is normal, but the other knee is got some kind of little floating kneecap that they'd only just discovered after. Yeah, so that's why he's
Is
out
it performance enhancing? It's not helping him, is it?
No, it's not. The opposite.
I'll ask about another footballer who I find fascinating. Bailey Smith, who used to play for the Bulldogs, is that arguably, objectively, the most gorgeous man in the AFL. Flowing blonde locks, headband. I hear some...
so.
Yes.
I used to think he was gorgeous.
Yeah, but not anymore. When he moved down Geelong Highway.
No, look, I don't hold a grudge against him because he is gorgeous.
Yeah.
But
he seems to draw energy from, not as a derogatory thing, but being the centre of attention. And I'm curious to know how you feel of Bont moving away from the Bulldogs, and at least I don't have to play in Ballarat anymore, and now I play at big sold out Geelong. Do you have any thoughts on Bailey Smith?
Well, no, I don't get upset about it. But I'll tell you what, when they were about to play Geelong, I had a brief contact with Jake Niall, who's a football
Yes.
writer on The Age, and we exchanged the odd text. And I said, what's going to happen with Bailey Smith when they play? I said, who's going to deliver the punishment? And he said, mark my words, it'll be Libba. And so it was. But I don't know if Libba actually thumped him, but boy, he gave him some dirty looks. And you would not like to get a dirty look from Libba.
No, he's got Simpsons tattoos.
Dark,
He's
scowling. Yeah,
owns 2 pubs.
I love him too.
Yeah. What do you love about Libba?
He's just such a good player.
Yeah.
He's one of those players that are just always there when needed. That's one thing I guess I learnt from watching Amby's team was what they're teaching them is how to trust. And it took me a while to sort of twig this because I sort of ignorantly watch a game. And I used to watch them at training, and there's a certain drill where they shout names. And you can hear them yelling, and they're saying, Jakey, 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 Xavier, Xavier, and yelling to each other. And I'm going, why are they shouting like that? And Ambrose said to me, well, a lot of kids don't like to shout. They don't like to use their voice when they're playing. But he said, you have to. You have to learn to shout so someone knows you're there. And that explained to me, when you see a whole bunch of guys running at top speed and somebody's got the ball and suddenly he'll just do this tiny hand pass and the guy next to him has got it and away they go. But I said to him, how does that guy know that there's someone there to pass to? And he goes, there's a lot of shouting out there. And that's what it's about. So things like this were a great revelation to me because I just thought it was a miracle.
It's a way to, I think, personally for me, learning to play sport as well was it's a place where it's okay to express emotion for being a young man, as opposed to there's places where you're not supposed to cry or you're not supposed to do this. And I know playing footy for me was that when I was younger. But then also I'm not going to say what happens at the end, but there's a final game which is really important, and it feels like you talked last time about medals and the losing team.
The medals.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea of shame and things like that, or just the rituals that happen in these moments of glory or in sport, even at a community level.
Yeah, well, somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. So I guess what happened with Amby's team was that they won the flag, to everyone's amazement, and the team that are we going okay?
No, we're great.
Yeah. Well, what happened was we were playing against Newport, which are a very strong team, and there's a lot of Muslim kids in that team, and they tend to be they'd thrashed Amby's team, like really, really thrashed them about 3 weeks earlier, and then they found that they were playing each other in the grand final. And we all thought, oh no, they're going to kill us. They're going to kill us. Because the Middle Eastern boys tend to put on, they grow physically at a slightly earlier age than the Aussie kids. And so some of ours look pretty skinny against these splendid looking boys. But anyway, so somehow we won, the Colts won. And it was a great thrill. So, but what happened was, and I'd never seen this before, that when all these sort of prizes and awards were being given out, the losing team, one by one, have to come forward and have, sort of lean their head down and have a ribbon with a medal on it, sort of as a memorial of the day, put around their neck. And what I saw these kids do was, and we said, this is very humiliating, I thought, for sort of the 18 of them. So it takes a while. 18 boys, one at a time, have to go through this little ritual. And I noticed, though, that they would come, while walking back from having their medal put around their neck, they would just go like this, put their hand here and pull the ribbon over their head, and they'd have the medal in their hand like that, and they'd go back to their place holding the medal in their hand, concealed in their hand. And I thought, what are they doing? What's that? I thought, is this some kind of Islamic thing about you don't, how you deal with success and failure? It seemed like a very strong image and gesture. And I thought, but I had a great sense of empathy for them. I thought, that their faces were completely composed. Nobody was angry. It wasn't an angry thing. And I thought, well, is it modesty or is it submission to fate, or what is this? And but I had this weird. This is going to sound awful because it's about me, not them. But when I saw them do this, I had this sudden flash to something that happens to me occasionally. If I've been shortlisted for a prize and haven't won it, if anybody says to me, "Oh, Helen, congratulations for being shortlisted for the Stella," whatever it is, I just want to punch their lights out. And I've always felt ashamed of that. I thought, oh, God, that's really disgraceful. And it's so unsporting to have that feeling. But I bet you that it's a very common feeling. But there's no way that you can express that without being really an awful person. And well, I've just expressed it, so, yeah.
The perspective you write from the book is you often talk about feeling like maybe you've made a mistake, or self-doubt, or or you feel like maybe you've made a mistake doing it. I'm starting a world tour next week, and at the moment, as I sit here, I'm like, this is the worst show I've ever made.
Oh.
But I know that moment comes every time we write a show. Not to say it's not going to be bad, it could. Buy tickets. But love to talk to that. Now you finished this a while ago, sitting back, how do you feel about this book with the perspective of having it all done and sitting here in a room talking about it?
Well, I've noticed that every time I write anything, there's a point in it, like what you're talking about, there's a point in it, in the process of writing, where I completely lose heart. And I think, why did I start this? I can't finish it, it's shit, everyone's going to laugh at me, and I can't write. What made me think I could write? I'm hopeless, I'm just a very small piece of shit. And then, but it doesn't, and then you just think, well, it's a fantastic thing that Beckett said. He said, I can't go on. I must go on. I'll go on. And that's really...
He coaches Richmond, does he? Sorry, go on.
No, but I'm sure that it's something that people have to say to themselves when they're trying to do something that they don't really actually know how to do.
Is there a part of you that goes, I really am not feeling this right now, but I know that that's part of it? You have enough self-trust?
It doesn't help to know that. That makes it worse. You think, oh God, no, really, this time, really, it's real, and I'm a failure. But once you're in there, that feeling doesn't usually come until you are around halfway, and there's no way out. The only way out is forward. You can't back out. You can't, because you've laid enough of yourself and enough of your energy and time into this thing to make it. If you stopped, it's pathetic. You've conked, you've shanked.
Yeah, you've shanked. That's a footy term. We love that. Is there something that you would like people to take from this book, or is it take what you think, or what's some feedback that you've received as well that has made you feel that that you've enjoyed about the book?
Well, I don't know how many of the boys in the team have actually read it. I think some of them might have, but their parents have read it and their grandparents have read it. And one thing I really like is that the fathers, a lot of the dads of the team, have come up to me and thanked me for writing it, and sort of almost like almost tearfully saying, I'm so glad you wrote this, because whatever happens now in these boys' lives, they had this thing that happened, they won the flag, and they'll always have this record of it. And I'm going, oh, that's so good. I was really happy about that, because things are very fleeting, aren't they? I mean, especially moments of glory. And we were talking in the green room before we came about how somebody had asked me at one point, what would happen to the book if they didn't win the flag? But you see, I thought, oh yeah, I remember. I didn't think they were going to win the flag. I had no idea they would win the flag.
It's incredible that they did.
It is incredible. But I thought, when I was, still writing away, and I was thinking, well, they're probably going to get thrashed, but I'm really good at writing about failure and disaster. I thought, well, nearly all my books are about terrible, sad things, and everybody has to cry a lot. And I thought, well, I can do another one of those. And so then suddenly they get up on their hind legs and win the thing. I thought, how on earth will I write that?
You did a wonderful job, and I'm as a footy fan, it was lovely to have your voice was really welcomed in that world, and I really appreciate you for doing it, but also for this wonderful chat this evening. Can we please give Helen a large round of applause for joining us?
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much for all coming tonight. Thank you to our team here for doing such a wonderful job.
And thanks to you.
No, get out of here. Thanks, sir. Have a wonderful night. Stay warm. Take care.
Thank you.